In the high-stakes, chaotic world of an emergency room, doctors are always in a battle against a killer that hides in plain sight. Today, we're going to dig into a really fascinating study that created a deceptively simple tool to unmask it, a 5-letter acronym that could save a ton of lives.
So I want you to picture the controlled chaos of an emergency department. A patient comes in with what looks like a common infection. But for some people, that infection is about to kick off a catastrophic chain reaction. That hidden killer? It's sepsis. And spotting it early is pretty much the most important challenge there is.
So what exactly is sepsis? It's not the infection itself. The key thing to understand is that it's the body's own immune system going into complete overdrive. It's a dysregulated host response that tragically starts attacking its own organs. And that's what makes it so incredibly deadly.
And this, right here, is the central problem for any ER doctor. How do you know which patient with a seemingly normal infection is about to go over that cliff? Who needs aggressive, immediate treatment, and who's actually stable? That's the million-dollar question. Yeah, and this is not just some academic exercise. In a packed ER, figuring out who those high-risk patients are is a flat-out race against the clock. If you wait for the really obvious signs of organ failure, well, you're often way too late. Okay, so doctors aren't working in the dark here. They have tools to assess a patient's risk. But, as the researchers behind this study pointed out, those existing tools had some pretty big problems of their own. On the left, you can see the issue. Existing scoring systems like MEDS and PRO were often just way too clunky. They required a dozen or more data points. The goal, over on the right, was to create something better, with a study called a parsimonious and pragmatic rule. In plain English, they wanted a tool that was brutally simple and actually useful for a busy ER doctor on the fly. And that brings us to the really elegant solution they came up with. Let's break down this clever and super memorable acronym they created, the CHARM score. Each letter in CHARM stands for a key risk factor. C is for the absence of chills, and we're definitely going to come back to that one because it's a little weird. H is for hypothermia, or a dangerously low body temp. A is for anemia. R is for a wide red cell distribution width, basically a lab value that points to stress on the body. And M is for a history of malignancy. Just 5 simple things that, it turns out, can powerfully predict a patient's risk. Okay, let's just pause on that first point. The C for absence of chills. This feels completely backward, right? I mean, we're all taught that shaking chills are a classic sign of a really bad infection. And the researchers totally acknowledge this. They say, yeah, doctors have always thought of chills as a toxic sign, a clear signal that the body is fighting something serious. So why, in this super effective model, does not having them point to a higher risk? What's going on here?
Well, the paper suggests a few really fascinating ideas. It could be that patients who are already too sick to even mount a chills response are already in deep, deep trouble. Or maybe it's that patients who can clearly describe their chills get faster, more aggressive treatment. It might even be that people who are just more in tune with their bodies and seek help sooner are the ones who report chills in the first place. It's this little medical mystery the score uncovered.
So, a clever acronym and a medical mystery are interesting, for sure. But the big question is, does this 5-point score actually work in the real world? All right, let's look at the numbers. The results are, well, they're incredibly powerful. For patients who had a CHARM score of 0, meaning they had none of the 5 risk factors, the score had a 99.7% negative predictive value. What that means is it was almost perfect at identifying patients who were at a very, very low risk of dying. In fact, the mortality rate for that group was less than 1%. And this graph just illustrates the trend so perfectly. You can see the in-hospital mortality rate climbing and climbing steeply with each additional point on the CHARM score. You go from nearly 0 at a score of 0 all the way up to over 30% for those with a score of 5. I mean, that's a crystal clear, powerful correlation. So how does CHARM stack up against the competition? This table puts it head-to-head. It compares its performance against other well-known scores and biomarkers. And as you can see, CHARM at 0.77 is right there at the top of the leaderboard. It actually outperformed the more complicated PIRO and MED scores and even common lab tests like lactate. So it's not just simpler, it's better. Okay, so what's the big picture impact of all this data? For the doctors and nurses on the front lines, it means something really profound. A simpler way to save lives.
This is just the perfect way to think about it. The CHARM score isn't some complex diagnostic machine. It's a smoke detector. It's that simple, early warning system that doesn't need special tests. It uses information that's already there to tell doctors, hey, pay attention to this patient right now.
The big takeaway here is just the incredible impact of this way of thinking. CHARM gives you fast, reliable risk stratification. It helps doctors channel those limited resources, their time, ICU beds, powerful antibiotics, to the patients who need them the absolute most. And it's just amazing proof that the best innovation isn't always more complex tech. Sometimes it's just a smarter, simpler idea.
And that leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. When you see the success of a simple, elegant tool like the CHARM score, it really makes you wonder, what other complex medical emergencies, from heart attacks to strokes, are just waiting out there to be cracked by the right simple, pragmatic score?